Viewers like you make this program possible. Support your local PBS station.
All these people here to enjoy the outdoors, and boy, they have no idea what just drove by. And we'll go right up top on the mountain and spray them all. Douglas County Parks picnic area here. Swiftwater Park. So we'll go up top and toxify things.
These helicopters flying over the ridge, spraying something, and they didn't even see the kids. The kids were all fishing or just playing by the river. And the kids were all choking and gasping. That night, they were all really sick. They had diarrhea, they were having trouble breathing. And we went down to the river that next day, and that's when we found dead ducklings and dead crayfish, dead trout. We called the Forest Service, and they said, oh no, it's perfectly safe. It was a mixture of 2,4-D and 2,4,5-T, Agent Orange, that was banned in Vietnam, and nobody realized that the same chemicals were being used here. And it's still going on.
J'ai vu l'avion passer et derrière lui, c'était comme un nuage. Et puis après, c'était tout mon corps était trempé d'une certaine poutre assez gluante. Et je commençais à tousser, à tousser. Je ne savais pas que cette poutre qui m'a recouverte, c'est un poison. Je suis née pendant la guerre, je vis dans la guerre, et maintenant aussi on est en guerre.
Agent Orange was a tremendously destructive component of a tremendously destructive war. In its own unique way, Agent Orange was the most destructive instance of chemical warfare in modern history.
You're such a good puppy, You're gonna be a big help. This is our newt pond. If the sun comes out, the newts will come out, but they're all in hiding. And in the spring, which probably in another month, they have orgies. I have X-rated pictures of my newts. When I was still 5 years old or something, I read everything, cereal boxes, the New York Times. I mean, it just didn't matter. And it was still during the war, and I read something about all the birds being killed by oil spills from ships being blown up. And that's what I worried about during the war, was all those birds. You coming, Mike? Gonna help me? And I started writing letters. I'm not sure who I sent them to, or wanting someone to take care of those birds, please. Maybe that was the beginning of my activism. I have no idea. We moved here in '74. The kids were just part of this landscape. You know, they were down along the river. They knew everything that lived down there. You know, the dippers. And they're called dippers because they'll sit on a rock and bow to you. My kids loved it. I mean, they were part of it. There were beavers and otters in the river then too. And of course all the fish and the herons and ospreys. And so they just were part of that. They loved it. There was nothing to worry about. Clear-cutting is one of the most insane things you could ever do. It's like strip mining a living organism, which a forest is. They weren't required to replant, and most of those clear cuts developed into huge brush fields. Anything that would save the soil was better than nothing. Then all of a sudden they're faced with this law that says you can't clear cut unless you replant within 3 years. So then they had to clear all the brush on these old clear cuts so they could replant them. It just all coincided with the end of the use of Agent Orange in Vietnam. Michael Newton from Oregon State University was getting surplus barrels of Agent Orange that the Air Force couldn't use anymore in Vietnam, and was praising the use of these things and how they were going to transform forestry forever. And they started to just blanket these huge clear cuts with a lot of Agent Orange. It drifts, and we could smell it. And within a few days, our garden was dead, the kids were all sick again, and the dog got so sick he died. One woman had had 14 miscarriages, and hunters were finding deformed deer, baby fawns with no eyes. Geese were hatching with horrendous deformities. They had their feet on backwards. They had crossed beaks. Some of them had only one wing or a little crippled up. I mean, we just didn't know until we were hearing the same thing from other people, and that it didn't happen until the spraying happened. That first meeting we had out here, no one knew what they were spraying or what it was for. A lot of people just assumed, well, it's the government doing it, it must be okay. We invited the Forest Service, you know, and we were basically saying, this is what's happening to us, and maybe you don't know about it, but now you do, and you need to stop. And of course, they didn't take us seriously at all. We call ourselves the document junkies, you know. Yeah, no trace of contamination found. That's the lies they got published. I mean,
Carol has been just a tireless champion for uncovering true, factual, scientifically based information and trying to get that before decision makers. These people were just literally at their wits' end, and I remember sitting there thinking, Bruce, there's some way you've got to help these people. They are literally, nobody's willing to help them. And I said, you've got to produce the experts. That if you can produce the experts, I'll take your case on, and we'll go to battle over it.
It was raining a minute ago and the sun just came out, so I just wanted to document this. I think this is why you're not supposed to spray at certain temperatures, and obviously you're not supposed to spray during the rain because it goes right down into the creek and over there and over there. Anyways, everything's going into the creek around here. These vapors, I'm breathing them right now. I'm in a gas chamber right now. These chemicals and volatile. You gotta be effing kidding me. I just got sprayed again.
Nous avons subi 1000 ans d'invasion des Chinois. Nous avons subi 100 ans de colonisation des Français. Déjà en 1953, les Américains sont déjà arrivés au Vietnam. Ma mère a participé à la résistance. Elle se battait contre le gouvernement à sa façon. Elle n'a pas de fusil. Elle est très connue et elle a de l'influence. Elle m'a donné une mission d'une petite messagère, une agent de liaison en clandestinité. Alors, on peut dire que j'ai commencé mon travail de résistante à l'âge de 8 ans. Déjà en 1960, la résistance a commencé dans le sud. Et moi, je vivais toujours avec la douleur à la pensée que ma mère est en prison, était torturée par la police du gouvernement du Sud. Ma mère était très fragile. Elle est fragile de santé. Et elle a dit, mais si je ne reviens pas, c'est toi qui vas me remplacer. Donc j'ai refusé d'aller poursuivre mes études dans le Nord pour participer à un combat, à une cause du Sud. La marche de Ho Chi Minh, c'est très longue, une marche de 4 ou 5 mois. C'était très, très dangereux. On était jeunes et notre idéologie, c'est de sauver notre patrie. On a traversé une région où les avions américains épandaient. Je me suis trempée dans des marécages de feuilles mortes jusqu'à nos genoux. On buvait cette eau-là. On mange les légumes qui poussent dans les environs. Donc on a mangé, on a bu du poison, quoi. Je suis restée à la base du Front National de la Libération, l'agence de presse. J'écris les nouvelles, les actualités. Mon mari travaillait à la commission des relations étrangères. Chacun a sa mission. Donc on ne se rencontrait pas souvent.
Tôi với Tố Nga thì yêu nhau từ thời sinh viên. Và đồng thời cũng nơi cái khu rừng này đó là cái nơi mà chúng tôi làm cái lễ kết hôn. Đấy. Không có gia đình hai bên. Chúng tôi trải qua một cái quá trình của một cái thế hệ trẻ phải dấn thân vào cái cuộc kháng chiến.
Et j'ai mis au monde ma fille le soir du 30 juin 1968. C'était quand même un très joli bébé. Tout le monde est content. Mais 2 ou 3 jours après, la peau commence à se détacher en lambeaux, en morceaux. On ne savait pas pourquoi. Donc à 3 mois, elle est comme le nourrisson, quoi, plus maigre. Et elle commence à ne plus pouvoir difficilement respirer. La chef de la clinique, elle m'a dit que son cœur a 4 handicaps. J'espère que vous arrivez quand même à comprendre une jeune maman qui a son premier enfant, qui est déjà condamné. Je me fais toujours des reproches, me disant toujours que moi je suis l'origine de sa maladie, l'origine de son décès. Même si j'ai mes 2 autres enfants, c'est le visage de ma première qui reste ancré dans mon âme. Et ces reproches-là, je les portais pendant plus de 40 ans. Jusqu'au... Je savais que ce qui a tué ma fille, c'est le poison, c'est l'agent orange. Ma deuxième fille est née dans le Maquis en 71. J'avais eu très peur qu'elle attrape encore la maladie de sa sœur. Elle a une maladie incurable qu'on appelle l'anphthalacémie. Alors son pancréas est devenu énorme, comme si elle en a 2. Pour elle, elle est plus grièvement atteinte que moi-même. Je pense que peut-être on m'a donné une mission à accomplir.
Le vent de l'histoire a accompagné Nia. Ce procès, il incarne cette ambition de la communauté des citoyens du monde qui considèrent qu'il faut mettre un terme à cette obsession de rester éternellement impuni, éternellement irresponsable. C'est un dossier sur le plan matériel, technique, qui est lourd. Les enjeux sont très importants, donc ça va être sans pitié, ce procès.
Après la rencontre avec William Bourdon, je me fais un peu de soucis parce qu'ils ont dit qu'envoyer 26 assignations à 26 firmes, cela fait une horde d'avocats contre le cabinet Bourdon. Le combat va commencer et dur. Je sais que je suis forte, mais des fois, on ne peut pas résister contre les maladies.
At the White House, the stage of history is set for the first meeting between President Eisenhower and Senator Kennedy since the election.
When Eisenhower passed over the national security apparatus to John Kennedy, how scared we had to be that communism was on the march and we had to stop it wherever it was. Kennedy loved the idea that American ingenuity, not just big, scary bombs, but different, more surgical kinds of technologies could be used to defeat these insurgencies. And Agent Orange, herbicides in general, was part of that strategic view.
Here
here at the Dow Chemical Company in Midland, Michigan, revolutionary chemical killers are being produced to help rid us of these costly pests. One of the newest and most versatile weapons in Dow's arsenal of chemical warfare is 2,4-Dow Weed Killer, proved in action against hundreds of weeds in a wide variety of crops. 2,4-D is a growth regulator type of weed killer. The action is physiological, appearing to upset the plant's growth processes and causing gradual but certain death.
The Saigon government in 1961 was a vociferous proponent of the use of herbicides in Vietnam. The Diem government was fighting a communist insurgency in the South that was supplied by the North. They felt that the insurgency was a major threat to their existence.
Okay. This is in October 1961. Things haven't really gotten started yet. These are telexes. It's a message from Ambassador Nolting. But basically it's saying President Diem is begging people to spray crops. And there's so much doubt and confusion in Washington about whether to do this or not.
And as long as they controlled the defoliation program in a very professional way, then there wasn't any concern that the prohibitions of the Geneva Protocol applied.
Top secret. The White House, Washington, November 30th, 1961. National Security Action Memorandum number 115. The President has approved the recommendation of the Secretary of State and the Deputy Secretary of Defense to participate in a selective and carefully controlled joint program of defoliant operations in Vietnam, starting with the clearance of key routes and proceeding thereafter to food denial. McGeorge Bundy.
Take away the forest cover, take away the insurgents' capability to hide and conduct guerrilla ambush operations. But once the overall war escalated, the defoliation program just sort of followed rather mindlessly right behind it. Spraying millions of gallons of highly concentrated herbicides indiscriminately over vast areas of forest, many times over, is chemical warfare. It was highly destructive, and it was massive. It was a weapon of mass destruction.
Ranch Hand was the name for the herbicide defoliation program run by the Air Force. And I was sent over to Vietnam in May of 1971 to do the final historical write-up of the Ranch Hand program. I had made friends with a young Army lieutenant over there, and he came to me one afternoon and said, "We have received orders from headquarters." This is 1971. We are to dump the computer and erase it. Not downloaded and shipped to Washington. Dumped, he said. He said, if you want any of that information for your report, you're going to have to come with me tonight, and we'll go over to MACV headquarters, and I'll get you into my office, and we'll print them out. And he turned on the machine, and we printed out a stack like that had missions, sorting, how many aircraft in every mission, coordinates, how many gallons dropped, the dates, everything for all of Southeast Asia, including Laos. My report indicated that there were some real problems developing from people exposed to Agent Orange. I finished my report, and it was immediately classified secret, and the government kept it locked up for over 35 years and denied that it even existed.
It was tantamount to a cover-up, regardless. There was information that was withheld, distortions that were commonplace, that did a real disservice to the veterans and to our rule of law. All of that occurred with far greater regularity and at far higher levels than I would like to acknowledge.
The powers that be went to great lengths to play down, to deny any effect of the TCDD, dioxin, in the herbicide.
When we started the litigation, this became a real David and Goliath act because we had the whole U.S. Attorney's Office representing the federal government and the largest law firm in the state of Oregon representing IFA, which is a front group for the chemical manufacturers and for timber sprayers. The Forest Service had been unwilling to do any kind of community health survey after the spraying to see if anybody was in fact being harmed. It was simply saying our chemicals aren't harming anybody, but it wasn't looking to see if they were harmed.
My cousin, she said she had a miscarriage, and a friend of mine, she did have a miscarriage.
And this was all in this area where they're spraying?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
The women have lived in areas that have been sprayed very close to their homes. Many of us have gravity feed water systems, and the dates that they were sprayed are really amazing because all of the areas were sprayed within a month before the miscarriage.
And it was very stunning, you know, that they would spray an area and within a month the miscarriage rate, what they called spontaneous abortion rate, would skyrocket, according to the hospital data.
Between my husband and I and our nurse practitioner, we delivered between 100 and 150 children a year. Seeing a larger number of birth defects than we would have expected, we saw a number of congenital hearts. And I think it was 1978, I delivered an anencephalic child. That's a child that doesn't have basically the normal brain. In my lifetime of delivering babies, I would not expect ever to see one. And about a year later, we delivered a second anencephalic child. Those odds were just astronomical, that a small practice like ours would have 2 anencephalic children.
All of these chemicals are suspect. We know in animals that they cause birth defects. Why are we using them in humans?
It made me realize that there was something going on. And the something that I was aware of was broadcast spraying of herbicides. At that point, it was mainly 2,4-D over our water supplies because we drink surface water at the coast.
Down below me is a dam and a water supply. If this camera shows it, there's the helicopter on the ridge right there by the trees. So we're going to be spraying right below it. Crazy. That whole unit over there is dead. Dead. And they're spraying more chemicals on it right now as we speak. I got to hold this low.
Hey, I'm counting on you.
Because right over there is the honcho of the forest. So basically we dropped 1,160 gallons into this right here, and it is, I'm going to show you real quick.
Is this one unit?
It's going to go basically right down into that watershed, and there's the unit's already de-weeded anyways. I don't know why they did that. And here's the reservoir. I'm down here at the reservoir, and we're going to go spray on the other side of the reservoir now, both sides of the watershed. My throat is burning.
The kids were involved in the whole herbicide battle. They were helping write the newsletters and draw the pictures and help with signs. There's the poster that Daphne made. She did that when she was about 11. They were right in the thick of it. We had like 5 minutes to come up with a name for this group. Citizens Against Toxic Sprays, CATS. It wasn't the most imaginative name, but it worked, I guess. Hi. Hi. And it wasn't until basically CATS was formed and started questioning it with, filing a court action, and then it suddenly got some attention, and there was a lot of pushback from the chemical companies and the timber companies.
Chemicals are being used as a means of achieving environmental goals, really. The attack is not scientific, it's purely emotional. The public does not understand, and we unfortunately haven't successfully communicated to the public as yet. Take 2,4-5-T, for example. 2,4-5-T is about as toxic as aspirin. The safety factor in the use of 2,4-5-T is far greater than the safety factors in the use of aspirin. Now, does the public understand that?
Documents disappearing is a common thing, I think, in this whole story. Susan Swift's health study that she was doing of everybody in this valley, she had done a door-to-door survey of people's health and the children's health and animals, anything that people could report about. And her house getting broken into and this health study, all the data she had collected, it was gone.
I was just taking information and gathered the data together, and I created a questionnaire to go, and I interviewed every home up and down 5 Rivers Road. There was an enormous amount of small tumors and miscarriages. Right after that, my box of documented forms disappeared out of my house. The board members of Citizens Against Toxic Sprays were going to Eugene over the mountain, taking these Forest Service roads, just going straight up and over the mountain, all gravel little logging roads. And we were being followed by a shiny sedan with guys in suits. And that was pretty bizarre.
One Saturday morning when my husband was making rounds at the hospital, two fellas in suits showed up at my front door and said they wanted to talk about the herbicides. And I said that was fine. My two children were running around and very happily playing. They didn't really say where they were from. I said, come on in, have a cup of coffee, because I had had a number of reporters and other people show up. And when they said, do you know at all times where your children are? I realized that I didn't. I said it was time to end the interview because it was clearly a threat against me and my children. And it worked. I'm done.
A van that had dark tinted windows on both sides suddenly showed up outside of Carol and Steve's house, who were the leaders of the Citizens Against Toxic Spray movement.
Mrs. Mercedes. The car was parked here, but they were walking up here with all their gear, obviously thinking I wasn't home. He didn't really explain why they were here. It was when I realized the other guy was sneaking up there and talking to the kids, then I got kind of angry. He was asking them all about what kinds of deformed critters we had in the freezer. Because we did. We saved a bunch of them, hoping to get them analyzed, you know, to see what was in them.
But the rear door flew open as it drove away, and they could see that there were large video cameras in there.
The phone company itself, their employees told us that our phones were being tapped. Steve would get in the car and he would usually drive over the back roads. Nobody drives over there. Nobody did then. Suddenly there'd be a car behind him and it would stick to him all the way every time they went to the valley to do anything. Who is it? We don't know. Is it government people? Is it industry people? There was no way to really know.
It was an obvious attempt to try to intimidate the folks who were bringing this litigation to try to reduce herbicide aerial spraying.
Well, we won a temporary injunction. What the judge in the Katz case, thanks to all those scientists and studies that we were able to compile, ruled was that, hey, you've got to include in your environmental impact statement the effects of these chemicals in Vietnam. And that was a blow to the Forest Service because by then there were some really documented impacts in Vietnam. We felt vindicated in a lot of ways, but his injunction only applied to 2,4,5-T, which is half of Agent Orange. The Katz case generated quite a bit of publicity just because it was so amazing that these people living out in the woods could sue the federal government and win. It was, you know, kind of unheard of at that point, especially on an environmental issue. So other people were contacting us. They were all experiencing the same thing. This was people in other places in Oregon, in the state of Washington, in Idaho, in Northern California. There were even requests from places back east.
But one thing I'll never forget is that just gathering scientific data from Oregon State University, what we were able to find from their own library, studies in Idaho of roadside spray workers that showed deformed sperm after the spray season.
So we put together an information packet, and then they could use that information to take their own actions and file their own cases, whatever. There were negative feelings toward what we were doing, the propaganda put out by the chemical companies and the timber companies that, number one, there's nothing wrong with the sprays, and number two, these people are just the lunatic fringe. They convinced the loggers, or some of them anyway, that they were going to all be out of work if they couldn't use the herbicides.
The house was on fire when Carol came up the driveway. The house was totally inflamed. Patrick said he stopped her, that she grabbed a knife off his belt and started running up the hill. And he just grabbed her and held her. And he felt sure that Carol was going to try to take her own life that night. The Van Strum children were gone. And we all crumbled. We all just couldn't believe it.
The firefighters said it was arson. I don't, it's hard to talk about it. I just can't really. They had done the absolute worst thing anybody could do to me, and they couldn't do any more. Okay, everybody, who's hungry? Yes, he wants some brekker. There we go. The animals were still here. I think that's what kept me going. You know, it was what was left of my kids, was what they loved, you know. Oh boy, here you go. Oki's the big one, 30 years old. He's very intuitive. Like, if you're really upset about something, he will come and just, like, lean against you and be comforting. Hi, Rudy Doody. He wants to help you. Well, come on. Feel better. I don't know. I rely on him. This was the garage. There was no floor here. And so we put a floor in, and I just was living in this room. And I still am. In a way, it was in honor of my kids, I had to keep going. They fought this fight too. It wasn't just me. And the only thing was to keep going for their sake.
Dans ma famille, 4 générations ont été en prison. Ma mère a joué au bagne de Polo Condor. Il y a des cages aux tigres. Ma sœur aussi, elle était dans les cages aux tigres.
Và coi như là biết là vôi bột rồi hả, nó dính tới đâu là lở loét tới đó.
Avec une mère comme la mienne, avec une grand-mère comme la mienne, avec une histoire de famille. Là, je peux pas. Les femmes de la famille Trân ne peuvent pas reculer.
Lớn hơn tuổi ông cố bà cố mình á, là bị bắt ra tù đây nè, rồi cái người ta bị đánh nè, từng người một như thế này đó. Bà cháu mình đến đây là để cảm ơn tất cả những người đã hy sinh, đã chết cho hôm nay là bà ngoại có con nè, phải không?
On m'a arrêté le 10 août 1974. La police du gouvernement du Sud-Vietnam savait que je tenais beaucoup d'informations importantes. Ils m'ont torturé, ils m'ont battu. J'étais enceinte de 4 mois. Et comme ils doivent quand même éviter le ventre. Donc c'était la tête qui me frappait. C'est pour ça que maintenant j'ai toujours mal à la tête. Ma troisième fille, je l'ai mise au monde en prison. Et un soir de Noël, 1974, et à partir de ce moment-là, elle dormait toujours, mais sur le sol. Quand on voulait m'emmener pour me torturer, alors, mais comme elle était très très malade, elle était toujours malade, et on ne pouvait pas me séparer d'elle. C'est pour ça que moi je pense que cette petite-là, elle m'a sauvé la vie plusieurs fois. Elle n'est pas... Elle vit en Australie avec sa fille. Elle est malade, mais d'une autre maladie, d'un autre aspect. Et ses enfants, c'est-à-dire mes petits-enfants, sont aussi très fragiles de santé. Ils ont aussi la maladie, anfa-thalassémie.
The federal government basically federalized all the chemical companies to do nothing but produce Agent Orange and other chemicals for the war in Vietnam. And they knew that the more they produced, the more money they would make. So they, in order to deliver as much as they could, as quickly as they could, they violated then existing industry standards for the production of herbicides by using a process that was much shorter, at higher temperatures, that was responsible for the presence of the dioxin and the ultimate chemical substances that were created. And they knew that it posed a risk to individuals. They knew that it posed a risk to the land. They knew that it contained a poison. And they knew that the effects could be devastating.
While I was preparing my report, I came across a letter that I got out of headquarters that was from Dow to the government and back. It said, we cannot produce the quantities of Agent Orange you want and maintain the low level, insignificant level of TCDD, dioxin. And they went back and said, don't worry about it. We need the quantities. Besides, it's going to be sprayed on the jungle over there. There aren't going to be any people there. And if they happen to get into it, so what? We're at war.
And a letter from Dr. James Cleary, an Air Force scientist, saying that he and others involved in Ranch Hand knew that Agent Orange was harmful.
We knew dioxin is an extremely potent carcinogenic, mutagenic, meaning it causes chromosomes to mutate, teratogenic, affecting the fetus of a woman. Very potent compound.
National Bureau of Standards estimate on the half-life for a dioxin molecule. 2 billion years. That's why EPA regards it as equivalent to plutonium, both in its toxicity and in its longevity, how long it can persist. So it doesn't go away. It goes away politically.
This is the first time that the scientists have ever created a molecule this toxic. And that they know that even, just 1 to 2 parts per trillion can cause birth defects, mutations, cancer.
We sprayed 20 million gallons of that stuff over there. Their watersheds are contaminated, their rice fields are contaminated, their wells are contaminated. Depending on who you want to believe, there's 400,000 or 500,000 adults contaminated with it and 500,000 children.
On est déjà aux 4e génération de victimes. Donc il y a des millions de victimes au Vietnam qu'il faut prendre soin, qu'il faut s'occuper.
I think it's the voice.
C'est un crime de guerre. C'est un crime contre l'humanité. C'est un génocide. Est-ce que c'est pas un attentat au génome humain?
Nếu như mà họ mời Monsanto vào đến đây và tôi sẽ cố gắng thuyết phục Monsanto là anh đã gây sai là anh đã sai lầm rồi, anh sửa chữa đi.
The Forest Service never did spray 2,4,5-T again. They substituted 2,4-D on the assumption that it had no dioxin in it and that it was safe. And Molese's water supply got sprayed.
Molese Connolly was one of the Five Rivers women who pleaded with the government to come and test their environment. She remembers that the EPA sent 2 scientists from Colorado. They took some samples and left, promising to return in 90 days. In the meantime, they wanted Molese to come up with more material. That included a backyard chicken, which she still has in her freezer, and a number of water samples taken with special EPA filters.
We called him, we wrote him, we wondered where he was. 90 days is what he gave us, that he would be back in touch with us. That was in 79. 83, here we are.
Are you angry?
I'm very angry. I'm very upset.
There were samples taken of people in the area, of tissue and blood, and I believe urine as well, and submitted for testing. Somehow, they disappeared. How can you have something like that disappear?
Well, it's both a bureaucratic bollocks and suppression.
Paul Merrill and Carol Van Strum have been battling with the EPA for years. They're also responsible for uncovering many of the EPA documents that have now come to light.
The EPA planned ahead of time with the Forest Service to come in after they sprayed and collect a body count.
You're saying the people out there were used as guinea pigs.
That's right.
How do you know that?
From their own documents.
I'm not sure what's going to happen now, but somebody's going to pay.
Dr. Mike Newton of Oregon State says that a recent study of herbicide applicators showed no signs of health hazards.
They've got to start listening to some of the residents and our rights. I mean, I have to move because my daughter became very ill just a year ago with a blood disease that has been associated with herbicides. I feel like I'm just up against the wall, you know, and that I've done all that I can do peaceably.
This is sort of a cause of life and death in a way.
Working within the system has been done. The appeals have been done. Lawsuits have been done. Public hearings, conferences with officials have been done, and still the spraying goes on.
This person has been contaminated. They sprayed people.
There have been incidents in other parts of the country where people have actually shot at the spray helicopters.
A helicopter was burned as a message to the companies who profit from spraying poisons. We sabotage poison-spreading machines as an act of self-defense.
No one was hurt. It was the frustration, even with the Katz case, that they could still go ahead and spray 2,4-D, and at that point they were adding, since they couldn't use 2,4,5-T, they added glyphosate and atrazine and Toradon. So they
all these chemical cocktails that no one has ever put together and tested on any living creature.
And so, you know, they could continue spraying is the point.
Our present health and the genetic future are at stake. We will strike again.
On est dans le maquis, à la base du Front National de la Libération. Chaque année, on a un jour de souvenir. Ça me fait revenir 40 ans en arrière. La base américaine est à quelques kilomètres de là. Donc, ils ont épandé les défoliants. C'est pour ça aussi que plusieurs de nos amis journalistes sont morts déjà pendant la guerre par des cancers, et surtout le cancer du foie. Maintenant, mais ils continuent à avoir des cancers, que de cancers. Ils sont presque tous cancéreux. Dans tout mon corps, il y a plein de nodules et puis ça grossit. Et puis ça se développe, mais maintenant un peu partout. Dans la colonne vertébrale, dans la cervelle, dans les poumons, dans le cœur, dans les artères. J'ai la diabète type 2. Je suis actuellement menacée par un cancer de foie. L'agent orange n'épargne personne.
newly released court documents indicate that the companies which manufactured Agent Orange knew as far back as the 1960s that one of its ingredients, known as 2,4,5-T, contained the toxic contaminant dioxin.
It just blew my mind to see documents, internal memos from chemical companies that would say, we know this is toxic, we're going to sell it anyway.
Dow realized that they needed to settle the Agent Orange case to keep all that information buried. In the fall of 1983, Dow, as the leader of all the 2,4,5-T manufacturers, withdrew all registrations for 2,4,5-T. And what that did was bury everything. All that evidence of dioxin in the environment, in human tissues, in the Vietnam veterans. Very, very damaging information on the health effects of 2,4,5-T and dioxin. Just was swept under the rug, went into EPA archives, and it's now gone forever except what I managed to save. So that record would have been dynamite for the veterans if that case had continued. But it didn't.
The case was not settled on any scientific basis. It was settled on a political basis. The defendants wished to avoid further litigation. The moment it was settled, their stock went up. So they made a wise decision.
I think this is good for the veterans. I think it's good for the defendants. I think it's good for the country because I think it allows us all now to put this issue behind us and get on with the business we have to do.
My mother had 2 miscarriages when my father came back from Vietnam, and then I was born in '72. I only weighed 3 pounds and 4 ounces. My father said he could hold me in his hand like this. I was so small. I'm missing my right leg below the knee, my fingers, and I'm missing my big toe, and my other toes were webbed. But yeah. My story is not very much unlike many children in Vietnam and other American children as well. So we share the same type of birth effects.
Mais est-ce que maintenant votre gouvernement vous reconnaît comme victime de l'agent orange ou non?
No, I don't get any benefits from the government. They deny that the children of male Vietnam veterans are affected. My father's own illness, he died of. So I'm hoping with your lawsuit that things will change, that it'll stick this time. And many people will understand how the chemical companies have destroyed many people.
I was getting so angry that my own government didn't want to provide help to veterans who are suffering.
We had a sense of moral outrage about what happened, and the fact that we felt as lawyers we had the opportunity and the obligation to raise these issues. And the case died. It's frustrating.
Was any assurance given when you arrived at the settlement with the chemical companies and the veterans that there would not be any more litigation? Would such an assurance have affected your role when the Vietnamese people's case came to you?
I'm not prepared to discuss the Vietnamese issue. It was a separate case, decided long after the major settlement was decided upon, accepted, and fully executed.
So then no such assurance was given to the chemical companies in the original case?
The original case gave the producers what they settled for.
And was there finality, an assurance of finality to that?
I thought there was.
These companies have been able to avoid accountability for what they've done. I think your case is incredibly important as sort of the last opportunity that we may have to hold these companies accountable for the wrongdoing that they knew they were engaged in when they made this poisonous product.
Des gens qui vivent aux États-Unis, qui vivent au Vietnam, donc en priorité, qui vivent en Corée du Sud, qui vivent en Australie, qui vivent en Nouvelle-Zélande, qui vivent au Canada, qui vivent aux Philippines, développent les mêmes pathologies, tandis qu'ils ne vivent pas au même endroit, qui n'ont pas les mêmes modes de vie, qui n'ont pas le même environnement, qui n'ont pas la même alimentation. Et qu'est-ce qu'ils ont en commun? D'avoir été en contact avec l'agent orange. Mais ce n'est pas suffisant. Ce n'est pas une preuve. Et les victimes sont là, sont des preuves bien plus pertinentes.
Mesdames et messieurs, par rapport à celles de millions de victimes de la dioxine qui vivent et souffrent encore dans tout le Vietnam, mon histoire est banale. Si, aujourd'hui, j'ai demandé à témoigner devant le tribunal international d'opinion, c'est parce que je voudrais parler pour ceux qui ne peuvent plus le faire, ceux qui ont été tués par ce maudit produit pendant la guerre, puis au cours de ces 35 années qui l'ont suivi, ceux qui en souffrent toujours. Je désirerais faire mon devoir de mémoire. À ce moment-là, j'ai rencontré aussi André Bouny et Maître William Bourdon. Et ils m'ont demandé si je veux me lancer dans cette procédure-là. Les plaintes déposées aux États-Unis ont été déboutées. Alors moi, je serai peut-être la dernière chance pour les victimes. J'espère que mes paroles, qui viennent du plus profond de mon cœur, contribueront à éveiller la conscience de ceux qui ont apporté la mort, le malheur, les souffrances et amené une extermination familiale au Vietnam. Peut-être cela fera jurisprudence pour les autres victimes.
The national forest here is no longer sprayed, and the reason is a series of lawsuits that began with the Katz lawsuit. But how about all those other people? How about people right down the road that have private timberland around them that's getting sprayed?
man, here he comes. I gotta reload him. All these chemicals are going in there. All this goes into that truck. This stuff is nasty stuff. It's a nasty combo, and it kills everything. It kills everything, including my ability to breathe correctly. Well, hold on. It says on the label, hazardous to humans and domestic animals. And it leaks out onto everywhere. There's just so many things not right about this.
They're going to keep these chemicals on the market no matter what. The only hope is for the community rights movement to keep insisting that we have the right to protect all of our communities from being poisoned. And maybe it's a pipe dream, but if these corporations have human rights, according to the Supreme Court, well, damn it, they should be subject to capital punishment just like an individual would be.
Pour chaque livre vendu, il y aura 5 € qui partiront sur le compte de procès. J'espère qu'à travers ce livre, vous arrivez quand même à comprendre un tout petit peu encore l'histoire de mon pays.
Bonjour à tous. Donc, je m'appelle Bertrand Ruppel. L'esprit de cette procédure, c'est avant tout d'établir la responsabilité et le lien de causalité par un juge. C'est extrêmement important. Et là où on a pu finalement fonder la compétence du juge français pour trancher ce litige, c'est parce que Nia a la nationalité française.
On est déjà à la 4e année. Jusqu'à présent, il n'y a que des audiences de procédure, de mise en état. L'empoisonnement de la dioxine dans mon corps, on ne le savait que très récemment. Quand j'ai vu qu'il y a une reste, il existe quand même des traces de la dioxine dans mon sang, ce qui peut m'aider à avancer dans le procès, alors j'étais très contente. Mais ça m'a enlevé un poids parce que je sais maintenant que ce qui a tué mes enfants, ce qui a donné les maladies incurables à mes enfants et mes petits-enfants, ce n'est pas moi, c'est la dioxine. Jonathan, je voudrais vous remercier pour tout ce que vous nous avez donné.
It's hard work coming for us, but
It's a lot of hard work, but I want to emphasize how important the work is. You know, even though you feel sometimes you're working in isolation, there's a lot of people watching this.
Et maintenant, j'ai un cancer, donc il faut nous aider à pousser le procès.
She was given the final results.
Okay, good.
Maintenant, c'est la course à la montre pour le procès. Donc, vous serez toujours près de nous. Peut-être Monsanto et compagnie souhaitent prolonger pour attendre la fin de ma vie, quoi. Mais ils ne peuvent pas sous-estimer le combat de la vieille David, quoi. Et c'est à vous de m'aider à le faire aussi, parce que vous êtes 1000 fois plus fort que moi. L'agent orange est, comme dit André Bonny, l'ancêtre des pesticides et puis des OGM. Donc si on laisse oublier l'agent orange. Alors, le tram des pesticides va continuer, quoi.
Documents accumulated over 40 years of Freedom of Information actions that I did, including several lawsuits to try to get documents out of EPA, PCB lawsuits, the Agent Orange lawsuits, trying to stop the government spraying out here. And then I had a bunch of stuff from Dow Chemical that they hoped I'd never get. I couldn't afford to store them anywhere, and that's when Peter von Stackelberg, a Canadian journalist, drummed up some funding to get them all scanned, and that was how the poison papers happened. Yeah, we must have scanned close to 200,000 pages. He could upload them as they were scanned. 10 hours a day, nonstop. A lot of the documents involve the fraudulent testing of chemical products. So lawyers now, in bringing these lawsuits, are being able to find that information and use it. I hope they'll make trouble. I mean, that's the whole goal, is to make them available to anybody that needs them.
Tous ces documents sont des documents internes et c'est extrêmement difficile de se les procurer. Et certains y sont arrivés après de longues années de recherche, d'enquête, d'investigation. Et donc on a pu bénéficier de tout le travail que Jonathan et l'équipe d'avocats américains avaient réalisé. Et avant eux, il y avait eu aussi un travail d'investigation mené par des journalistes, par des lanceurs d'alerte. Et cette mutualisation du travail, mutualisation des expériences est évidemment indispensable pour nous.
Will you film my tongue, please? Can you see that? I am at the hospital, and I'm getting ready to go into the decontamination shower. I showed them some of the pamphlets of what I got sprayed with, and this one right here they seem to be very concerned about. They have told me to come out here and stand here because they don't want me in the hospital, and so I'm being treated like a biological hazard here. I just got up. This is what The only way I can sleep at night. Just eating lots of those because I can't breathe right due to these chemicals. This is my little rag I have at night and by the bed, and obviously you can see I'm using it for really nasty. I know this is a nasty video, but this is the crap that's coming out of me.
There's a wonderful saying that if you think you're too little to make a difference, then you have never been in bed with a mosquito.
It is with great pleasure that the conference co-directors of the 36th Annual Public Interest Environmental Law Conference select Carol Van Strum as the recipient of this year's David Brower Lifetime Achievement Award in recognition of her outstanding environmental social justice work in Lincoln County, Oregon.
I just want to thank everybody for making this happen. It's amazing. And the other thing I want to say is that it was never about me. It's always been a lot of other people, some of them not alive with us today. And that's what's going to make the changes that are needed. I think you've got several generations coming up of troublemakers that'll do a whole lot more than any of us did, I hope.
Je consacre mes dernières forces aussi pour que ça gagne, pour que justice soit faite pour les victimes de la dioxine, non seulement du Vietnam, mais les victimes américaines aussi. Et c'est ça qui me rend encore plus forte. Il y a 5 ou 6 ans, beaucoup qui ne savaient pas ce que c'est que la dioxine, ce que c'est que l'agent orange. Maintenant, j'ai des milliers d'amis qui me soutiennent. J'ai 7 ou 8 associations d'amitié, Suisse, Belge, Italie, Vietnam, qui me soutiennent. Et je pense que c'est là la victoire. C'est là qu'on gagne.